Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Luc-Étienne Rouillard-Lafont. I am Editor-in-Chief at Business Immo, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this second conference of a series hosted by Business Immo and Choose Paris Région. Today, we are fortunate to have a very interesting panel to discuss the business opportunities of companies that companies can find in the Paris region, as well as the real estate offer available to them to make their projects a reality. To start the discussion, I turn to Mr. Lionel Grotto, Managing Director of Choose Paris Région. How has the economic attractiveness of the Paris region evolved despite the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I think it's an interesting time for investment, and we're seeing quite big changes, and I think we're going to discuss that in the hour we'll be together. But 2020 was a historic high, high level of foreign direct investment in number of jobs, more than 11,000, with a lot of jobs in retail activities, in consulting, engineering, in R&D and AI. Life science also more than doubled in number of jobs. 162 HQs chose the Paris region, which shows that Paris as a hub to enter Europe for an investor, it is something that was a reality, but is still a reality and is still reinforcing itself. Other projects also that are booming is in the data center sector, also in film production studios, but that will be the topic of further conferences. So yeah, I think everyone knows that JLL report, February 2021, highest investment in the Paris region, Q1, Q4 2020, ahead of Chicago, Frankfurt, London, Los Angeles, New York, and others. High rental growth, lowest vacancy rates. I think the context is that of, yes, the pandemic, but there is the Brexit, and we will have maybe more regulators that will be tougher, and the Brexit is now, it's now done, and maybe with COVID at some point we will start crossing frontiers again. So the moment is this one. It's also the Olympic Games, which will be soon happening. The Grand Paris Express, the first stations, we see Saint-Ouen, which is direct now to center of Paris. So all this is happening together, and I think it's a global context to analyze, to see all the opportunities that the region offers today.
And a sector that has a lot of opportunities and that has been positively affected by the evolution of consumer trends during the pandemic is obviously logistics. Nicolas Verdillon, you are head of investment properties at CBRE France. How has the Paris logistics market evolved over the last year?
Well, it actually, you mentioned it in your introduction, and thanks for the invitation, but it has been let's say, tremendously increasing, even if currently it is stabilizing. When I'm saying it's currently, it has increased, it's because, let's say, at global scale, on France, the average 10 years was 3.3 million square meters take-up in logistics. Last year, it was 3.6. So it is still above the 10 years average, this first thing. And in the Paris region, it's around 900,000 square meters take-up each year. So we see this tremendous trend, which is, like you were saying, let's say, a consequence of the e-shopping, e-retailing, e-commerce. Why? Everybody knows this very interesting graph, which is what is the proportion of the consumption by internet in France. It was 10% 1 year ago, now it's 15%. So 15%, we see this tremendous increase. Obviously, it is, let's say, much less than compared to UK, where it is something like slightly less than 30%. But let's say that France is a barycenter in terms of ratio of consumption through e-retailing. With the consequences of this is that all the logistics sectors, the supply chain has already adapted to this new need. Now, the next step of this is what is obviously how to do the last kilometer, like we say. And this is obviously one of the issues. And there is tremendous demand now to organizing. There is the Greater Paris, which is pretty good. But now we are at the door of Paris, now how to get inside Paris. And there is really a big need because of this B2C consumption, B2C delivery. Okay. Now, having said this, because we are talking here about investment in Paris, is that it has also good, let's say, consequences for the appetite of the investors. Why? The first reason already, obviously, there is diversification. Everybody is talking about diversification, but also because it's also now the scale in the logistics is much bigger. When I started, before I got some gray hair, I mean, the logistic scale, logistic platform was pretty small. Now they're pretty big. We talk about the XXL. Yeah. So this is very good. This is good scale of economy. And also, let's say there is an interest also because you mutualize your risk when you're an investor. The other thing is that it's less true now, but earlier, let's say 5 years ago, I remember in 2007, we're saying, well, look at the yield in the logistics, it's 6%. We never experienced this, whereas it was 8, 9, 10%, 15, 20 years ago. Actually now, well, it's less than 4% because there is such a competition and also such a security of the tenant compared to some years ago. And last point I'd like to highlight is that there is not only the box. There is not only the quality of the signature. There is behind what we call the, let's say, administrative authorization for the environmental authorization, let's say. And this is very hard to get it. So when you get this authorization, as being an investor, this is good for your property. Taking into account that at French scale, we are one step ahead compared to other pan-European countries where, in terms of environmental respect, environmental regulation, we are much ahead, much more in advance compared to this. So I've been very quick, but there has a main focus where there is such a money, where now, let's say, in investment volume, we are more or less between 3 and 5 billion euro minimum each year now in France.
Any strong appetite?
Yeah, very strong, which is normal.
Emmanuel Mercier, you are partner at Logistic Capital Partner. And as such, you are both an investor and a developer of logistics asset. What is attracting you to this Paris market?
Yeah, just shortly giving my background, I've been working for brick and mortar, Casino, Auchan, IKEA, and I've been working as well for Amazon on a real estate part. So therefore, I've seen the move from brick and mortar and to e-commerce. Logistics is really something that represents today 10% of a French GDP, just to give a scale. So it's really something that matters in the global economy. You can have logistics on B2B and B2C, and logistics on both are a bit different. Anyway, if you look at Paris area, if you cut the country in two equal parts, you'll see that 60% of business, 2/3 of a business is at the northern part. If you look at the Seine River, if you look at the railway structure and the road structures, all goes to Paris, all goes to this center. On top of that, Paris area is 12 million people, the third largest region in the European Union. So it's really something you cannot miss. If you, on top of that, consider that it will be Rugby World Cup, it will be Olympic Games, as mentioned, it's really something that makes people thinking that Paris is on the spotlight today, and it's a real place to be. What I was going to say regarding how to implement logistics today in urban areas. From history, it has been considered that storage function was to be positioned outside the cities. Right now, if you consider e-commerce, you need to shorten your time to better serve a customer. And therefore, we do see that there is an emergence of assets which should be placed really at the heart of the catchment area, what we call, when we're talking about retail, and we say delivery area. That moves, an asset where you want to run 80% of a business, 80% of a flow from a centralized point. Top of that, we do believe that logistics will become on top. We'll have customization of products. So meaning you want Nike, you want them green and blue with your name. It's just printed at the last mile. And therefore, I do see that more and more we need facilities which are becoming really, really in urban areas. Not always small, can be big. And therefore, since you don't have, land available, you need to go on multi-story schemes. You need to go with assets which are optimized, fully optimized, where investment in optimization starts to be maybe twice as much as the share of the building. What we work on today as LCP, we're working in refreshing existing assets. This is something we think that there's a market for that.
Okay.
We're working in recycling lands where we develop new assets and that. The first project of LCP was a former Philips factory in Netherlands 5 years ago. We hear about some commercial center that could be vacated. It's not a big market. We do observe that in the US, but it's really, really a narrow target for us. When we're thinking about mixed-use building,
okay,
it's not easy to do because you get statutory issues, and you're mixing, an industry with, for example, housing and a truck still.
Or urban logistics, maybe would that be?
Yeah, it could be an idea for urban. But I'm personally not, thinking it's really the strategy to go for. Whereas this is something in our idea, but we don't have yet the way to do that in a smart way. We do consider alternative way of transportation to the road. Just to put some vans on a boat and move them across the river to the center of Paris. This could be a good idea. Try to think that logistics would become with bicycles more than only a truck. What we look at or do think about is that there are also around Paris a lot of Class B or Class C assets. And if we start to develop some green fields to create a vacuum to free up these lands of Class B and Class C, there we'll start to be able to rebuild on the Class B and Class C once they've vacated.
And open a new potential if...
Oh, definitely, yeah, definitely.
Okay.
And we've heard that the market is there, so it's really something we can do. We act when doing a new building, we're really having in mind ESG being really part of the puzzle. It's really something that, we want to make things which are certified, BREEAM very good, BREEAM excellent, LEED platinum. This is really something important. As mentioned, when you do an authorization in France, you have to do an environmental impact assessment, which is, by the way, an European demand. And when you do that, you look at the wide range of issues, and you consider the people, you consider the flows, the pollution, and all of the spectrum. We're saying that the industry is facing challenges, and our job is to provide solutions. Is to provide solutions to the communities welcoming the project. It's the first thing we're implementing ourselves within the Paris region. We're thinking about our clients and want to keep the rents at value, which is part of a challenge. Landowners that would like their existing asset to be valued at the highest, and funders to ensure that the capital is used in a smart way. I would like to share with you two small sentences that the community can understand well. I say we all like buses to help reducing the carbon footprint. We should better consider trucks, seeing the bus, the goods. This is one simple thing. And the second one is we're changing from a pallet handling to a parcel preparation. So this is changing to e-commerce. Warehouses became fulfillment center and employing more and more people. And it's not, an empty space with no one in. You really have a place where you attract jobs. Okay.
Mr. Verdillon spoke about it. You too as well about the appetite and therefore the competition that is found on the market and the challenge that investors can have to develop a new logistics asset. Karim Abra, you are head of Europe and Asia Pacific at Ivanhoe Cambridge Europe, and you have signed one of the biggest logistics transaction of 2020 with the acquisition of the Hub and Flow portfolio last year. As an investor, how do you navigate these market trends and this competition to build your strategy?
Well, thank you for mentioning this deal. We're actually very proud of it. I think this was the largest transaction last year, and we didn't only do this deal, by the way. We did a number of funding deals and development deals. I think we probably did like 15% of the market last year. So we're really happy. But it's been tough. To answer your question about competition, it is a very competitive market. But it's not only the case for France. Yeah, it's the case everywhere in Europe. It's the case in the US. It is the case in Asia. And so for us, the way we deal with that is we try to do things that others don't necessarily do. Yeah, and this is really have been our strategy. I mean, we own roughly globally $10 billion of logistics. Today, it's not an alternative asset class anymore. It became like one of our main focus for growth in the next 5 to 10 years. Okay. We're really focusing on this. And so typically what we do is rather than actually buying the core product at a very steep price, we like to create the product. And if you look at our strategy all over the world, we always have local platforms. In the UK, for instance, we have a development platform where we go and buy land, we take development risk, construction risk, lease-up risk. And in France, we're doing the same. Yeah, we acquired an existing portfolio because there was some value creation pockets in this portfolio that you mentioned. It was roughly 80% occupied, but you had lease-up. We're doing capex. We're doing development deals as well. So we're trying to build the product rather than actually only buy the finished product. This is how we actually differentiate ourselves with the competition. And I think Nicolas said something interesting. He said logistics is a diversification strategy. I think it is, yes, and there is clearly a shift from office investment to logistic and residential, and we'll probably talk about this a bit later. But there is also diversification within the logistics sector. Yeah, so far, logistic was mainly big boxes, large distribution. We're seeing diversification within that sector, like self-storage, like light industrial, like last mile, and all these sub-logistic sectors are sectors we're actually focusing on at the moment. So we're looking at different strategies. Again, building local platforms, investing into developers, buying land, constructing, assets, creating destinations, leasing up, taking this kind of risk so that we can create the core product for the end users. And this is really how we differentiate ourselves versus the competition.
Okay, thank you. Lionel Grotto, therefore, if we can believe our panelists, there is a strong appetite for logistics, and logistic companies should be able to find new assets and even, might I say, better assets going forward. Therefore, maybe how can territorial and public actors accompany this movement?
Well, today, there are a lot of opportunities in the sector that the investors have described very well, and challenges also for the metropolis. I mean, with the construction works of the metro, with the last mile deliveries that we've been talking about. We need, I think, daring conversion projects, because we can't use land as we did before. There is a strong movement in France not to use land, inefficiently. And I think today the elected officials, they are switching also the way they see logistics, the way they are seeing offices. Well, maybe we'll talk about that later. Some of them had large office products they wanted to develop, and maybe are switching that, are seeing that it's important also for their citizens to have mixed uses in the city. And so there are strong strategies by Métropole du Grand Paris, by the Paris region, by also intercommunalities to make space for logistics and accelerate the carbon-free transition. For example, of road freight vehicle fleets, for also developing logistics for the last kilometer, and developing also the transport of goods by the river. Emmanuel was mentioning that, and we need innovative solutions. We, as an agency, are can put investors in contact with the local authorities when needed, and also makes them make it possible for them to intervene in impact projects that are happening today, and we want to develop more projects that aim to reduce carbon emissions. So that's something we can do. Connect foreign companies and with logisticians that have ESG approaches. Connect them with emblematic large projects that make an impact. And so we are eager to be part of the transition, public and private sector together, because we can't do the transition just being all separate and all its own strategy, and we really need to do it together. And I think we have this approach, and we as an agency will definitely be help for all those people to come together.
Okay, I'll take this time, because I forgot at the beginning, and for that I'm sorry, to tell people at home that if they have questions for our panelists, obviously you can write them, and I will try and make sure to ask them to our panelists. Because I didn't ask before, I will give myself the first question, because acceptability for the logistics projects is obviously a big, is very important, and therefore maybe my question is, has the acceptability of logistics project improved in the last few years? Is it easier to develop logistics projects than in the past? Maybe Mr. Abra, you were talking about developing your own assets. How do you see this subject?
Yeah, no, clearly there is actually, I mean, land is always difficult to access, of course, everywhere in the world, but, we see opportunities, development opportunities. I think it's more a question of whether we want to take this risk or not, whether we're happy about the location, whether the trends or the fundamentals of a certain deal are strong or not. But clearly, there are available, opportunities when it comes to developments. There is supply, there is strong demand, and this also we still like the supply-demand dynamics for logistics. So we're still very positive. And we see it actually all over the world. Yeah, I mean, as I said, in the UK, in France, but we are actually very active in China, for example, at the moment. In India, these are markets where we really continue to grow. So I think this is a common trend. Spain is actually a market that is growing very, very fast as well, with very good fundamentals. So we're actually pretty happy. And coming back to our topic, obviously the Paris region remains, the number one hub. This is most of our exposure is around the Paris region, although we have also a strong exposure around the Lyon region. But all in all, I think we own 700 or 800 million euros of logistics in France. And we have a significant pipeline coming forward, so we're excited about it.
Great. Mr. Mercier, maybe the same question, because you are a developer as well, and you talked about the challenge of integrating logistics in urban areas. Do you see developing a logistics asset becoming more easier going forward?
Yeah, going to city center is always more difficult than staying in a campaign. It's quite clear, to make things simple. So, but I think we are there to save that, and we do see statutory and regulations moving in a sense that helping that. We are quite active as well in bringing a voice in there. We do see, with Lionel present there, some appetite from local authorities to make this happening. And yeah, logistic bashing, I think it's a back our shoulders right now. Logistics starts to be really something that people are really starting to want. And we got to take that turn and to make it happening.
Okay, we could talk about logistics for the whole hour, because it's a very interesting and a growing sector. But I want to also to talk about a maybe more niche sector, but that has shown a big growth and a lot of potential, which is the life science sector. Lionel Grotto at Choose Paris Région. you see a strong potential in the development of life science. You alluded to it earlier. What are your ambitions for this growing asset class?
Well, before talking about the real estate part of the topic, health has always been a strong industry in the Paris region. It's more than 300,000 jobs, so it's really huge. And there's always been a strong ambition, industrial ambition. Sanofi has a majority of its France activities in Paris and its surrounding areas. We have more than 40% of the academic research here, laboratories. So I won't make the list. I think it's not the objective here. And yes, in the real estate sector, I think what's important is we need to structure this ecosystem, which is quite overwhelming. When you see a map, there are a lot of actors. I mean, a lot of actors, a lot of labs, a lot of companies, and a lot of activity. But I think we also need classes of assets that will allow us to have all these life science companies to come together to really be the European hub for biotech. I think we have the potential for that, and we are currently supporting around 5-7 real estate companies in development of scientific campuses, parks, including buildings that are dedicated to biotech and medtech, startup incubators, investors looking to diversify thanks, their portfolio better. I mean, so all these actors are now looking very clearly at the Paris region, and we are helping them, connecting them with the territories. There are a lot of projects that are underway. I won't make the list, but just for the people that are listening to us, they can download some files. If I think they click. Just
on the platform, yeah.
On the platform, and they can download some documents with the products in it, and they will see concrete examples.
Okay, and you talk about a hub. We are lucky to be joined by Mr. Laurent Pépin, who is a business and partnership director at Genopole, which is France's leading cluster and incubator in biotechnology. It is located at the city of Évry, just south of Paris. Mr. Pépin, first of all, welcome. What distinguishes the life science sector?
Yeah, it's a big question, of course. What can I say? First of all, so we are Genopole. We are the French leading biocluster, as you just said, and so we have some experience about that. So currently, with the COVID, everybody is thinking that everybody is an expert in RNA now. That's something new. But at least you still need some expert in this area, and Genopole is the expert of biotech. We have currently, it's a biocluster, but it's also a biopark. This is why I'm here for this kind of talk, because it's a biopark. We have 77 companies on the campus. We have 18 academic laboratories, so which is very interesting, of course, for real estate. And real estate in our job is very difficult and very specific. Of course, because we have some different, I would say, area and different field. So, for example, at Genopole, we are developing in genomic, of course, new therapeutic. So we can cure cancer now, for example, which is I think it's a good news.
Congratulations!
It's possible to do that. We are also pretty good in bioeconomy. So in food tech, we want to sometimes to change from meat to other plant-based food. So it's also we are also working on this area. So as you can understand, in this kind of field, you have different needs, big needs. So if you want to develop a new technology, a new cure, a new drugs, it's very different to develop a new base food. So this is where we are good, in fact. So in terms of real estate, people need a laboratory. So we can provide BCL1 and BCL2, which means biosafety level 1, biosafety level 2, which is a product very important for companies. So in terms of real estate, it's very big advantage to be able to provide this kind of of labs and laboratory and offices to companies.
And what does it mean for you to be in the Paris region as a life science real estate owner?
Of course, it's a big advantage. In fact, to be clear, as Lionel said, we are. And everybody here, we are the center of Europe, so it's good for a company to be at Paris region because you can go everywhere when the sky will be open soon, of course. But even by train.
And the railways. Also.
It's what I was thinking. The train. We have a lot of TGV in France. That we are speed train. So that's very, very interesting also. So they are all located in Paris. So you can go everywhere in Europe. So that's very good. And in terms of collaboration, for example, for company to come to Paris is very interesting because you have a lot of talent. The talent pool is big in Paris. We have a lot of institute, a lot of university, a lot of international people. So that's pretty good to be there. So as a company, you can find collaboration very easily. Of course, we are many people, which means you can get a lot of find new customers easily. So for a company, a life science company is very interesting to be located at Genopole and in Paris region, of course.
Okay, and it's interesting that you say that because the life science sector as a real estate asset class is very much more developed in the United States and even in the UK. Maybe I'll turn to Mr. Verdillon. How do property investors view the sector in France?
Well, there is many views to explain. You were mentioning US. I mean, first point we must put emphasis on is that the global volume for the last 2 years in US invested is $12.5 billion. Well, euro, sorry. And in France, in Europe, sorry, it's 4.5. So you see it's divided by 3.5, something like this. So we can see this huge amount of investment field, which is here to be taken. But the issue is that this market is still, let's say, a bit opaque. There is not that much information regarding life science. There is not that much data. So there is a feeling, there is an interest for obviously diversification, but we need to aggregate a number of information. The thing which is good is that, for instance, in Paris, we have already a lot of, let's say, locations which are identified. You were talking about Genopole in Évry, but some others location, not only in Paris, but above all in Paris, which are already identified. And this is the opportunity for the equity to, let's say, engage and invest in some other support where you have a sort of maybe a better return on the risk. What I mean here is that when you look at the demography, all the people are getting older and older. I mean, just one figure I have in mind is that between today and 2030, people more than 70 years old in France you will have 23% more. Between 9.5 million to 12.5 million.
Significant.
So it's significant. What does it mean? It means only, well, in that we will need more, let's say, healthcare. We will need more, let's say, way of looking after older people and so on. So, okay, there is a consequence on what we call the senior housing, but above all, in this lots of, let's say, life science, biotechnology, the pharmaceutical, and so on, so on. This is one point. The second point is that we are all involved in the new and very quick urbanization and the new way of life. Our new way of life is that now let's say, the way we eat, the way we do the sport, the way blah, blah, blah. And the result of this is that we need even more, let's say, to take care of our health if we want to go much further far in terms of age. So when you take all this, plus the fact that there is a real government support, there is a real, let's say, private support, and a real, let's say, société civile support, you see all this convergence of strength and muscle to put the life science ahead and in front of the sunlight. Now, having said this, the fact is that the money is there for diversifying. However, when I was saying earlier that there is an interest to get a better return for, let's say, less important risk, I'm going to take an example. Genopole, on the west part of Genopole, you've been there a long time, there is the Saclay Plateau. There was a very interesting article last week in the newspapers where you were mentioning, it was mentioned all the developments, the new university, polytechnics, the Central, Paris Tech, and some others, École Nationale, etc. So you have this university hub here. You have also all these companies have written that it is including some 400,000 engineers. Can you imagine 400,000 engineers in this location, in this platform at Saclay? If you want to invest your money here, only because you see, oh, there is an office building here, I'm going to invest my money here, there is a risk that you have no demand pressure. You are not letting pressure because the location pretty far from Paris with no reason for. But when you aggregate the reason why this company is there, why Danone is there, why this pharmaceutical property is there, it's because there is a hub of life science. So your security, you are not going to pay, you're not going to have a return like in the central business of Paris, what we call the Golden Franc, but you have the same, let's say, security. Because when you launch, let's say, a wet lab or dry lab or a clean room, this costs money. You are located. There is a coordination between all the staff and the engineers. They want to communicate, to connect between each other. They are not going to leave after the 5 or 6 years lease term. So you securize your investment and you have a better income compared to be with an office element in, for instance, Avenue Hoche or Avenue des Champs-Élysées. So these are many, many reasons why there is a lot of money knocking the door. Anglo-Saxons are pretty in advance compared to us, I must admit. Karim, and I will leave the voice to Karim because they are much more in advance than some French investors on this particular point. But to finish, there is not a week, and we don't have at CBRE a call from an Anglo-Saxon investor or from some players, major players saying, what's going on life science? We want this, we want that. And I bet here that we're not talking, because it's not the subject of SCPI, our French REIT. They have already diversified in residential, in health. But I can tell you they will diversify also in life science.
Okay, interesting. And well, thank you for making my job easier. We will turn to Mr. Abra. Ivanhoe Cambridge recently announced a life science operation acquisition in Boston. So you are active, your company is active on the sector. How are you pursuing your ambitions on the sector, and do they translate could they translate to the Paris region?
I mean, we would love them to translate to the Paris region. The reality is there are no products at the moment. I think the Paris market is probably, for life science, is probably, 3 to 4 years behind the UK market, and then which is 3 to 4 years probably behind the US market. So I think, look, in the next 2 years, we're going to see some improvements. I think you talked about the need to structure the ecosystem. And I think this is really important. And there are no such hubs like Oxford and Cambridge, for example, in the UK at the moment. Saclay could be one of them, and I think that's going to get there. But we need to see hubs, and for life science, you need to see basically hubs to invest in life science hubs. And this is basically what we're doing in the US. We invested actually last year, in the last 6 months, actually, we invested roughly $1 billion in life science. In the US. In Boston, as you said, we invested in the biomed company as well. $500 million. We're looking at stuff in India and in China. Every time there are the right hubs, the right locations, we look at these opportunities, and we always look at opportunities where you can also expand. We're looking at something right now in India where we're buying a stabilized campus, okay? But there is actually available land, because what is really important is all these tenants are small tenants, small startups, and you need to be there the day you want them to grow. So that's really important. And coming back to what Nicolas said, we would love to actually come at an early stage, help some operators, help some developers, to build the hub, to build the location. For us, this is really something we can do, and we're looking at opportunities like this. We'd love to do it in France. and I'm sure we're going to see some opportunities in the near future. But at the moment, yes, it is quite limited. The last thing I want to say is like, be careful with what I call the life science washing. Yeah, I mean, we've seen some opportunities where whenever you have a pharmacy, someone calls it a life science. So I think I'm just warning people who are listening that not everything is life science, and you got to be it's a very specific product, and that's something. It's a great product. We love the fundamentals again. The supply, the demand dynamics are amazing, but it's something that you really need to understand, and often you need to have the right partner or the right operator along you.
Mm-hmm. And we talked about Saclay, Genopole, obviously. Might I add Villejuif Grand Parc, which will have a cancer research team. Maybe Mr. Pépin, can you help us understand what it takes to develop a life science asset, and what are the let's say the keys to unlock this potential?
To unlock the market of life science in Paris region, it's also a big question again.
Yeah, we could take the hour, but we don't have
exactly.
it.
Okay, if we compare to US or to UK, it's of course different. The history not the same. UK was the entrance of the US before to come to Europe. It's a fact because of the language. Now it's not anymore. I don't know, but it will not be anymore the case. UK company or US company will come directly to Europe because UK is not anymore in the Europe. So that could be a big opportunity for that, because if you are in Europe, I mean political Europe, you have to have your own product to be on the market. You need authorization. So that could be a big option for Paris region, and we are working on it for sure. And then in terms of development, we have a major player in the Paris region, like Sanofi, but also smaller player that we are taking care as Genopole, but other people, other incubators in Paris region are taking care of that to increase the number of small companies that small become big. So we are working on it. It takes time, but
and a company like Mr. Abrassel, yeah.
Exactly, that takes time, but we will do it. And then after, you need people, you need experts to come to help investors to come in France or to come to Paris region, expert in life science, and we think that we are expert on that. We can help you to find the right location, to find the right laboratories, because when you have a laboratories with a lot of technical needs, you need expert to be able to understand that. And of course, if you are investors, you cannot know everything, and you can count on us to help you on that.
Great, thank you. As I said, we could continue on the life science sector that has a lot of potential, but as we discussed fast-growing sectors, companies will still need more traditional assets like offices and retail premises going forward. Nicolas Verdillon, what have been the main trends on these office and retail sector over the last year?
Well, I like when you say still need. I mean, I'm a bit, I wouldn't say fed up, but tired of all this office bashing. I mean, this is, okay, the teleworking and remote work or whatever. It is true that not move, not make any change will not be an option, this is for sure. However, to say that the office is died is an ineptity. So we are very confident that by the coming days, let's say majority of people will be back here. It's not to talk about teleworking, but what I would like to say is that having said this, however, it is for sure that the pandemic has changed a bit the angle. And we can anticipate that the pressure, the average size per unit compared to what it was used will be slightly lower because of the teleworking, but 10-12%, maybe not more. Well, maybe it is too much in advance to say it. However, something sure is that the demand will much more fly to quality, this is for sure. What does it mean, fly to quality? It means to be more selective in terms of location, in terms of quality of the building, the wellness. Obviously, we were talking earlier of the ESG. This is something very important, both for the tenant as for the investors. So let's say, in an environment where it is well established, where there is sort of mixed urban mixed use, to make that people. So it means what? It means it's going to be much more concentrated, much more selective, but it will be there. I just want to remind one or two figures. I will not be too long on this. For instance, in Europe, since 10 years, the average ratio of investment realized in office is 44% at pan-European level. In France, it's 66% for the last 10 years. We see so the gap. There is much more investment done in France in offices. And the last investor survey was done last December and January, while highlighting that at pan-European level, the office element is almost still representing about 40% of what the investors want to put, where they want to put their money, leaving aside some others. Which means what? There is a demand. This is no doubt for investing and also for being used. So this is first part of the answer of your question. Not forgetting, obviously, the flexibility of this new and agility of these new devices, premises. Now, you mentioned in your remarks the retail element. I would say also, well, there is a bit which is, let's say,
has been hard hit.
Yeah, a bit of bashing for the retail. But it is not. It has been accelerated by the pandemic, by the COVID-19. It is not new. It has started earlier, and there is many reasons. We've talked already earlier of the e-shopping, which here it is one of the reasons. But the e-shopping is not something saying we are going to stop to have physical retail. This is totally, I'm hearing from time to time this. No, there is just a restructuration of the retail premises, which maybe now it is true that the, let's say, what we call the how long is the facade might be less important. Still need it important, because behind you need to have a sort of behind or rear part of the premises, sort of click and collect delivery, for instance, a bit of showroom more than earlier, a bit of storage. So you must, let's say, engage your shopping retail premises in another way. But it is not the hand of, and it is not in the hand of, even more when it is located in a, let's say, central urban organization, with many attraction, many proximity. Where they might have a sort of issue, it is true, it is regarding the shopping center. I'm not going to say bad thing about the shopping center, but the thing is true that it is maybe too big now, too dedicated for, let's say, for the leather, for the clothes and some others. You need to, let's say, it was at the beginning. It was a location where you could shop everything you need. Now maybe it must be more driven by some services which has already started. Some leisure it has already started also. But above all, let's say the critical mass might be less important, and also maybe more open on the outside. Because all these big 150, 200,000 square meters shopping center are very, and it is not now anymore in the, let's say, spirit. So at the end of the day, it is true there is a restructuration of the retail. It is not finished. It has already started. Let's say the prime location, the in-center will be still very successful, but organized differently. And the big major, let's say, anchor must maybe now readapt to a more open sky way of shopping with some other additional services.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Abra, at Ivanhoe Cambridge, you are obviously a developer of office space around the Paris region. How has the pandemic changed Ivanhoe Cambridge's strategy? What is your vision for the office of tomorrow? As Mr. Verdian says, we can expect an evolution. What is this evolution for you?
Yeah, look, it's. I don't think the pandemic has changed our strategy, because we actually already had spotted these new trends before the pandemic. We didn't think it would go so fast. It's true, and the pandemic has obviously accelerated a number of trends. But clearly, there are things we're seeing. I think you said, or Nicolas said, the word traditional. I think we're trying to move away from traditional real estate now. Okay? Real estate is going through a revolution. 20 years ago, I went through the financial revolution. Everybody was talking about real estate, in terms of cash flows. Now we're talking about real estate in terms of innovation, ESG, flexibility, service, experience. And I think these changes that we're trying to implement in our portfolio. So if I have to say one thing that has changed is we don't want to invest in traditional real estate anymore. We're looking at our existing portfolio, and what we're trying to do, obviously, and this is true for office, is we're trying to adapt our portfolio, which is traditional because it's something we acquired in the last 20 years, and that's normal, and everybody's in the same boat. But we're trying to adapt it to the new trends, to what the users want to see in the future. And for the new acquisitions, new investments, clearly we still look at office, but we are looking at office in different ways. Life science is actually for us an extension of the office sector. Mixed use, mixed use is really important. For us, this is for the future of real estate. But a mixed use project in a traditional office location will not be successful. If you want a successful mixed use project, then you're gonna have to look at it within a mixed use location, a neighborhood, what we call actually internally neighborhoods of tomorrow, areas that are going through urban regeneration. These are type of acquisitions we're looking at. We acquired something in Berlin 2 months ago. Last year in Paris, we acquired, for example, an old industrial site in Boulevard Voltaire, where we are going to build residential, retail, office. And we think that actually with the Grand Paris Express, we'll see actually more and more opportunities to access mixed-use opportunities, typically like in neighborhoods like Montrouge, like in Saint-Denis-Pleyel, not everywhere in Saint-Denis, but around the Olympic Village. Clearly, there's going to be very strong opportunities, I think, in terms of mixed-use real estate, in Aubervilliers, in Saint-Ouen. These are areas that will actually benefit from the old infrastructure that are going through within the Grand Paris, and we'll be positioned to access these type of opportunities. And the last thing I would like to say is also, mixed real estate, mixed use is not only for necessarily for horizontal real estate. It's also, we see mixed use within office, within towers, within large, within taller buildings. And this is a trend that we're seeing all over the world as well. So that's something which is really important for us. And again, the last thing I want to say is also on ESG. ESG today, lots of people were talking about ESG in the past as something we got to do, and we felt it was more cosmetic than anything else. This is clearly not our strategy. We have a team of 7 people. We have our global leader for ESG, who is actually based in Paris, and he runs all our ESG efforts, from Paris globally. Today, if an investment doesn't meet the ESG criteria, we wouldn't do it. Our mission is really to create, to generate strong financial performance, but to have a social and an environmental impact as well when we do the investment. So that's also very important for us.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Grotto, Mr. Abra talked about the Grand Paris Express, which obviously unlocks a lot of potential around Paris for the emergence of new hubs by letting people move more freely around Paris. How do you see the Île-de-France office stock evolve over the next few years?
Well, I think I remember when we were supporting a company in life science. It was a real estate investor, and we were trying to pitch Villejuif. And it was like 2-3 years ago, but it was just impossible. They wanted Paris 13, they wanted Paris first, but I think this is going to change. It's something that the pandemic has really accelerated. We were talking about accelerated trends. I think this is one of them. And if an investor today wants to make also an effective investment and finding the right opportunities today, I think he can't only look at Paris Center, Paris Triangle d'Or, etc. It really needs to open its eyes and understand the larger region, at least the cities around Paris that were cited by Mr. Abra, and maybe also later Paris-Saclay, etc. So yes, in the documents that are downloadable, we've listed a series of projects. Some of them were quoted before, and the cities in which they are located were quoted before. So it's nothing absolutely new. But I think it's really happening now, and we see really interesting projects. I visited recently in Nanterre the Arboretum project, which is 126,000 places. I mean, it's a campus. Yeah, it's really a global campus with a vision on the user, centered on the user. I think that's really what's going to happen next. And as an attractiveness agency, we want to work with private developers that have this vision that was also quoted before. ESG is important for the investor, but it's also very important with the user. When you see a wholly wood constructed building, it senses something. I mean, you feel different, you breathe different. It's different. Wood is not. Not only wood can work, but it's just an example. So yeah, and we also have another example in Boulogne with this Metal 57 project by BNP Paribas. It's also linked with history, it was an old factory from Renault and now renewed. I think that's genial, and I think investors also want this link between history and having something very that you can use, which is really oriented to the user. So yeah, big opportunities and a need to go maybe deeper in the understanding of the Paris region and not do the same as this investor that I had in front of me and that I just couldn't. It was just, the metro will be tomorrow. No, the metro is now, and in some locations tomorrow, but if you want the right opportunities, then you need also to take to move and look at all what's happening today. Yeah.
Okay, and therefore we have a question from the audience, Mr. Franz Schinger. I'm sorry for my pronunciation. He asks, could you please point out the scenario concerning the need of office space for the next years, maybe with a focus on the suburban area? If I understand the question correctly, is do you see businesses needing new office space? From what I gather from our discussion, I think the answer is yes. Do you see, because as we know, the take-up last year during the pandemic saw a significant drop, but do you see businesses needing office space in the coming years?
Yes, I will leave my friend answer and complementary my answer, but obviously we will not reach such take-up we were used to until here 2019, where some people were thinking that the trees were reaching the sky, like we say. However, we were 1.3 million square meters last year, which is a huge drop compared to the 2.3. We lost 1 million. We anticipate more or less 1.5 this year, so it will be slightly above. What we must take into account that it is true that during 2020, the market players couldn't take decision because of the lockdown, for instance, and because also the economic perspective. Do the economic perspective now are better than year 2020? Let's say, maybe not, but they are clear. We know better where we go. So let's say the trend of taking decision is not yet totally here, fluent, but is much better. And from time to time, I'm hearing that, because of the potential decrease of ratio of number of square meters used by the tenant, is this going to stop the transaction? This is totally crazy. Why? It's because even if you need less, but you will move. Now, what will, let's say, slow down the transaction is that number of tenants are renegotiating their lease. So it is slow down, but this doesn't make that there is no real demand. And other things, there is a number of subletting in time of process. Why? Because in this environment, this anxiogène, this risk-averse environment, obviously everybody around the table or elsewhere, let's say, we need to keep being agile and adapt to the very quickly change of the economy of the world. So we are not in a position to take strong decision, and we like to have some agility, which also maybe is one reason for slowing down. But there is a good movement slowly, and we anticipate that second semester and beginning of 2022 will be much better, much better.
And Mr. Abra, therefore, maybe for you, because Mr. Verdion talks about agility, for you is the challenge a flexibility to be able to, because we often say that real estate is in a slower time because it takes years to develop assets. How do you address this need for agility and flexibility?
Well, you need to be really flexible and pragmatic, and I think you need to have the right product. At the end of the day, I think you mentioned Arboretum, so that's a project in which we invested. We actually launched that vehicle called Icawood with our partners from WO2 and Woodéum 2 years ago. And at that time, lots of people were telling us, why are you launching a vehicle in order to build offices in cross-laminated timber? And today we're actually really happy that we actually had that project, because we're looking at a different number of projects, and clearly office in wood, office in cross-laminated timber. You see interest from users. This is actually a new theme that is coming forward more and more. And so I think to answer your question, it really depends on the product and what you bring to the users. If of course you go back to old, like I said before, old traditional offices, I think you're going to have less demand, because the demand is weaker today, and we're going to go in the next 2 years. There's going to be a weaker demand for leasing. So you need to be creative, you need to be different, and you need to bring a different value proposition to the tenants and to your clients.
And if I understand correctly, therefore, is it right to say that companies looking to implement their business in the Paris region will be able to find state-of-the-art office premises that meet these new needs going forward?
Yeah, the answer is yes. I mean, as long as you have players who are really can look forward, can be creative, the answer is yes.
It depends on the location. Some vacancy rate is pretty low, and some other vacancy rate is higher. But generally, it's because there is a hub of common transport, which is not the same, and a tertiary location, which is not recognized as full. But there is opportunities.
Okay. This is all the time we had for today. Obviously, we could have gone on much further. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you all at home for watching us today. And see you soon for another event with Choose Paris Région and Business Immo. Have a good day.